We're reading a chapter a day from this book, Here If You Need Me, by Kate Braestrup, chaplain to the Maine Game Wardens. Today, chapter 9. We were squatting in some uncomfortably prickly bushes near a bend in a river, watching a fisherman throw his line into the water. Binoculars screwed into his eye sockets, Warden Don Carpenter wondered in a whisper whether this guy, he knew him, had decided to get a license this time, and how many extra illegal fish he might have already stashed in the styrofoam cooler he was using for a creel. I wondered how to discipline an errant twig that kept prodding me in a portion of my anatomy I'd rather not name. Then Don held up his hand for silence and passed me the binoculars. Look, he whispered. Not there, there, just to the left of that hemlock. See it? Holy moly, I thought. What an adorable fat little bird. Its feathers were a mosaic of gray and dark brown, its breast patterned tidily in snowy white. It scratched at the leaf mold with large grayish pink feet. What is it? I whispered back. Spruce grouse. You don't see them often. The grouse did not appear to notice us, even though we were crouched no more than 30 feet away. It scratched out a nice little patch of open dirt. Watch this, Don whispered. The grouse paused, took a deep breath, then flung herself down into the dirt and commenced flopping and flailing. What's wrong with it? I asked, alarmed. Is it having a seizure? She's having a bath, Don whispered. The grouse jumped up, shaking the grains of dirt through her feathers, then repeated the procedure, taking a few moments between flopping sessions to preen and polish her white patterned breast to an even higher sheen. Don and I quietly passed the binoculars back and forth while I whispered intelligent remarks like, "Oh my God, that is the cutest thing, that is the cutest thing." Completely charmed, I was willing to tolerate the improper advances of the viburnum bush if only the grouse would stick around and let me gaze at her. And she did. It took about 20 delightful minutes for her to complete her toilette. Then the spruce grouse, spruced up, as it were, departed refreshed, and Warden Carpenter remembered the fisherman. "Oh, shit," he said, and trained his binoculars on the riverbank. But the fisherman was still right there. He had popped open a beer, drank it as we watched, then chucked the empty can into the water. "You know what? I don't like this guy," Don remarked cheerfully, "and I hope he does have some extra fish in that box, because if he doesn't, I might just pinch him for littering." As it turned out, the fisherman did indeed have 2 brook trout over the limit, and he feebly tried to conceal that fact, which served only to confirm his guilt. With a jovial grin, Don wrote him a summons and made him retrieve his beer can. "A good day," Don said with satisfaction. From her spot in the back seat of Don's truck, his canine, Tiki, anointed me generously with saliva. "Thanks for riding with me. You brought me luck." Sometimes I think I live and work in a parallel universe. That is, I know that I live in a crass and boorish culture, a culture of shock jocks and road rage, reality television and thong underwear, corruption and consumerism, mean porn and meaner theology. I know all this, and still the world I move through is rich and beautiful. And the people I work with, especially the wardens of Maine, are decent, discerning, and good. Okay, so I frequently confuse game wardens with saints, only to be brought back firmly to earth by the groaning demurrals of those who I canonize. They will confess to the usual complement of sins, their own and one another's. Gossiping, they gleefully throw stones from what they readily admit are glass houses. They will speak of resentments, envies, fears, and an inordinate affection for alcohol, nicotine, and inappropriate sex partners. There are the occasional failures of friendship or fidelity. Too many of them chew tobacco, spitting their soupy brown saliva into coffee cups, so I always have to check before I sip. And they cuss. Fritz Trisdell has the richest and most blasphemous vocabulary. "Suffering Christ, your holiness," he'll say. "Could you come down here and do some of your holy rolling Pope John Paul minister type business? We've got another drowning. Jesus, Mary and Joseph, with one thing and another, I don't see how the Jeesley, Maine taxpayer can expect me to get my paperwork done." Fritz loves to garden and to cook. He gives me tomatoes and squash in the summertime, and jars of homemade basil pesto, redolent of garlic. The warden's service is like an Italian family, Colonel Santaguida says. It's all about food. He's half Italian, so he knows. Until I began working with game wardens, I had never eaten smoked brook trout, stewed moose meat, venison chili, or skidder wheel donuts, which are just like ordinary donuts but enormous. A skidder drags logs. Its partner is the fellerbutcher, which sounds like an Australian insult, but refers to a huge, terrifying beast that lumbers around on paper company land, snipping and gathering great bouquets of tree trunks for the skidder to haul from the forest. Like other enforcement agencies, the Warden Service holds an annual awards banquet. It's the only banquet I know of, however, where the honorees do the cooking. I'll show up at the dining room of a fish and game club, commandeered for the occasion, and find Lieutenant Trisdell back in the kitchen, his green uniform shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, white apron tied on, his glasses foggy from the steaming pots. He'll have some young wardens back there with him, rolling out biscuit dough or mashing potatoes while he adjusts the seasons on a baked salmon. My job at these gatherings is, as Fritz would say, to do the Hail Marys and the Hi-Ho Silvers. I give an invocation before the awards are given, and I say grace before the meal. I did not grow up praying and therefore perhaps approach these moments with an uncommon awkwardness and awe. To ask a room full of people to join as you will in a spirit of prayer strikes me as an invitation into an almost painful intimacy. Join me as you will, I say, and am always astonished when even the unchurched warden, the agnostic, the cynic, folds his hands, gun hand and free hand, one to the other, and bows his head. Guys who invariably choose the corner table in a restaurant and sit with their backs to the wall expose the vulnerable napes of their necks, on my word, out of politeness if nothing else. The Maine Warden Service is not a church, let alone my church. The Maine Warden Service is part of the state government and an organization with employers and employees. In a civil society that rightly separates church authority from civil authority, I must tread humbly and gently when I speak to and for God here. I hope that my prayers are not experienced as an imposition or an irritant or simply stupid. I hope those moments feel loving to the wardens, whatever it is they believe or do not believe. I'm sometimes asked whether my employment as chaplain violates the separation of church and state. After all, I am present at search scenes, the sites of drownings, the front doors of the suddenly bereaved, not as a social worker or a crisis counselor. It's written right there on my shirt. I'm Reverend Braystrup. When I offer words before shared meals or warden service ceremonies, I'm an obviously religious person, using religious forms and language in what would otherwise be a completely secular environment. So why does the Warden Service need a minister? The simple answer is they don't need me. I'm not necessary in any urgent practical sense. For 120 of its 125 years, after all, the Maine Warden Service managed quite well without a chaplain. They could manage again should my position be abolished. I don't make the difference between finding and not finding a body, between order and chaos, life and death. They do. But I am told that it is helpful to have a chaplain present at a search or an accident, that by taking on the task of being with the victim's family, I free the wardens for other tasks. Perhaps more important, as a minister, as opposed to some other brand of helping professional, I serve as a symbol of a profound truth. My uniformed presence signifies a human and humane understanding on the part of the wardens and the wider community that the body in the woods or in the water is not just a practical problem, but a matter of tremendous spiritual significance for those most intimately involved. As reverend, I can express our reverence. Still, I'm the whipped cream, not the pie, I tell the wardens. The cream and salt, not the coffee or the stew. For me, these prayers are a luxurious indulgence, moments in which I am free to tell the game wardens that I love them. O God, whose name is love and whose work is justice, I offer thanks to you for this day and for this fine and funny company. While Fritz Trisdell's biscuits bake and Nate Robertson's beans stew and Mike Marshall's smoked trout waits to be savored. In my prayer-induced stupefaction, it seems that the office of chaplain of the main warden service was generously created just to give one middle-aged woman joy. The end of chapter 9.